welcome back. Brenda, welcome back. Got a couple new faces in here today. We'll give it a couple more minutes and we'll get rolling. Got a little trivia for you guys today. For those of you that were on last week's webinar, it's going to be a question related to what was our topic? Patient health information and consent.
Consents.
So,
Gosh, Ray, how did you forget already?
and a lot going on here, in a good sense. In a good sense. Give it just one more minute. Hope everybody's doing well today. I'm personally dealing with some allergies, so bear with me if I sound like I just woke up.
That's the meds working.
I know. Took a Zyrtec before I went out the door this morning.
Ooh. All right, so it looks like we're gonna have a guest star today with my youngest. Give me 1 second.
No worries. So in the meantime, I'll go ahead and pull up the trivia question for today. Let's get the share screen going. Let me know if Jose, let me know. Hey, buddy, let me know if you can see.
There we go. All right, buddy.
Jose, can you see screen?
Yeah.
Awesome. So today's trivia question, guys, blank consent requires that a patient have a full understanding of that to what he or she has consented. And the choices are A, implied, B, express, C, written, or D, informed. Give you guys
These are getting better, man. You're getting better at
give you guys a
these.
couple minutes to put your answer in. I see. Oh man, we're getting some chatter today. We got 3 responses. Not bad. Looks like the consents right now is D. We'll give it another 30 seconds. How about that?
Yeah.
Anybody else? Going once, going twice. So blank consent requires that a patient have a full understanding of that to what he or she has consented. The answer is in fact D, informed consent. So good job for those that had participated. And that's the only trivia question I have today. So let's go ahead and dive into today's subject. Let me go ahead and get the presentation on the screen. Jose, just let me know if you can see.
Yep.
All righty. Well, let's get her going. So hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us again for another edition of our compliance step-by-step webinars. My name is Ray Walters, and I will be your host for today's webinar session. Also joined yet again by co-host and little co-host, co-host Jose Delgado, and we'll say a special guest appearance from his son. And just a quick background of Jose's experience. He's got over 17 years of experience in business development, healthcare management, and consulting. His latest ventures owning a telehealth clinic, which, by the way, for those of you that might be in this this room that deal with telehealth, we are going to be talking about telehealth compliance next week's subject. Jose, did I leave anything out?
No. The consulting firm, it's a healthcare business, been around since 95. We do everything from cradle to grave. So everything from the provider comes in or an entrepreneur comes in with an idea to implementation to helping them find funding to expansion, to helping them find land or locations to the eventual sale and transition out of the business. So
No, great stuff. And again, just for those of you that are new joining in today on these series, again, we conduct these webinars every Tuesday, same time, 1:35 p.m. to 1:55 p.m. We usually go a little over, but hey, our goal is to bring a value to you guys, whether you're an EPICompliance customer or maybe you've taken a course through us in the past. But before we dive into the subject material today, I just want to give you a brief background of EPICompliance. We were established in 2013 by leading healthcare professionals. EPICompliance, we do healthcare compliance, specifically in HIPAA privacy, HIPAA security, OSHA for healthcare, Medicare waste, fraud, and abuse. And our goal is simple. We want to provide compliance training, compliance solutions to healthcare students, healthcare businesses, and business associates alike. And we want to help streamline those processes, make it simple for you. At the end of the day, I think everybody in this group can agree with me, including Jose. Compliance, not a fun subject, right? And there's a lot that goes into it. We're simply here to help guide you through that process. And today's subject, we're going to be talking about contingency planning. And just want to go over some of the objectives today. I'm going to be just providing a brief overview of contingency planning and its purpose. We want to categorize various vulnerabilities and threats in healthcare. Talk or discuss the different components that make up a contingency plan. Also want to explain the importance behind risk assessments towards obviously contingency planning efforts. So without further ado, contingency
So let's punch it.
planning. Yeah,
Punch
so
it,
let's
like
talk about it.
context clues from mild elementary, middle school teachers, right? For
Right.
English, especially contingency planning, it's in the name. Like, what are we going to do if an event occurs? Specifically, when it comes to compliance, they're looking for a very broad definition, as what Ray has put up here. So this is where, even though this is technically a HIPAA security conversation, if you document it correctly, you can double dip into the OSHA section. You can double dip into obviously HIPAA privacy, buddy. All right. You can obviously triple dip into some of the OIG contingency planning as well. So we look at something as very simple as, what are the natural disasters that are more likely to happen in your area? So you need to have a list of those. So what do you do if and when those occur? For OSHA, active shooter. CDC for a while had the COVID protocols. This goes right along with the bloodborne pathogens from OSHA. So there's a lot of different things that you can pick and choose to be very specific, or you can keep it broad and have one plan for everything. Most important part though is that when life occurs, document the testing. So what do I mean by that? Here in Florida, with hurricanes and bad thunderstorms, we can lose power. And some practices have a lot of their key components to conduct their business through the internet. So if the internet goes down, what do you do? So you can't. So all of a sudden you can't do billing. All of a sudden you can't do telehealth. All of a sudden your phones, if it's a voice over IP system, your phones go down. So what do you do? What do you do if the power is out? What do you do if the internet goes out? So you can test all of these just as you go through your day, your life. Hey, all right, we're testing this. Why? Because it's happening. So you can see how the plan tests out, and then you can just do an after action report with your executive team, your incident response team, and go over, okay, well, we're going to make these adjustments or those adjustments. So, for example, one of the big ones would be right now, with everything going on, the active shooter situation. So, you want to figure out, okay, where, if someone's coming in and this is an employee, or if someone's coming in and this is a patient or a family member of a patient, or let's say I'm just in a very contentious specialty and someone that is not very empathetic to what we do is wanting to get involved or harm us. How do we deal with these situations? Where do we go? Where do we put everybody? Who's calling who? Who's calling the cops? Who's calling this? Who's calling that? So you really want to be able to figure out and really identify who's doing what. What's that role look like? How do we minimize everything? What do we do after after everything was handled? Maybe you were able to prevent them from leaving the guest waiting area. So cops took them. How are you getting back to work? Are you getting back to work that day? Let's say that it's a hurricane and your roof was leaking and your server room flooded. How quickly are you going to be operational? What is that process? What are those protocols for while the server room is down, or while the server room is flooded, or while the server is crapped out because it got a ton of water on it? So you really want to figure out those two major components of how do I mitigate the damage and minimize damage, and then how do we make sure that the organization flowing and going. So if you're in a hospital setting, some of this stuff you've been doing just because it's common sense. Hey, power goes out. Well, guess what? Most hospitals, if not
Generators
all,
kick on.
have generators. That's just
Yep.
why, because they gotta have them running. Some hospitals even have their own specific internal power grid,
Mhm.
just for life support systems. So it just kind of depends on what do you do? What's that migration like? What's the contingency plan? If you're on two separate systems for something like that, what's the contingency plan for those people that are on those life support systems? How do you migrate them off of it, obviously quickly in an orderly fashion without overtaxing your other resources? So it's all fun, but the most important part is figuring out those contingency plans.
Jose, who's the person in charge of creating these contingency plans?
Your incident response team is in charge of this. Your HIPAA security officer is going to obviously have a broad overview and an incentivized interest, but realistically, your incident response team is usually your executive team, and those are the people that are going to want to be involved with something like this. This basically is right after the disaster preparedness protocol. So if you already have a disaster preparedness protocol, the contingency plan is unwinding all of that and trying to get back to normal operations as quickly as possible.
No, understood. And I know you kind of harped on the vulnerabilities and threats. This slide sort of just categorizes, what's considered a natural threat. I think
Yeah.
you were talking about the acts of violence. That's sort of intentional acts.
Yep. So basically the way that you categorize this is actually a pretty good way to categorize this for most offices.
Mm,
This is your natural disasters, your natural threats, because they all tend to be relatively the same kind of harm. The technical man-made ones, and then the intentional acts. That's a good way to split them up and just say, hey, look, if somebody asks what's my contingency protocol or contingency plan for this, then you can just pull one up. The big thing is making sure that honestly that they're very similar to each other, just because your end employees do not have that much bandwidth. We always have to
of
assume the
course.
lowest common denominator. So we have to make sure that it is something that everyone understands quickly. Boom, it's a hurricane threat. All right, what's the disaster preparedness protocol, and then what's the contingency protocol for that? Okay, now it's an active shooter. Well, what's the protocol for that? All right, cool. Now let's say it's it's a ransomware situation. All right, well, who do you contact? What's the protocol? Which computers are affected? Is it the whole system? So you got to figure out what are all those protocols going to be. Some of these are going to be more IT based. So then you're going to go and be like, all right, first call is to IT.
Mm.
Hopefully your IT is monitoring this situation and they pick up on the IT side of things faster than you do, but you never know. So it's all fun. This is actually the one thing in HIPAA that I actually like testing, because you
It's
can
just
just have
interesting
fun with
because
it.
it seems like almost the scenarios are endless. If you
Yeah,
think
it's
about it, you could.
absolutely, the scenarios are endless, but it's also a situation where you could literally have fun
Yeah.
testing them out.
So
What I
kind
mean
of
by that is, oh, we're gonna test the power outage and just
right.
knock the breakers.
Right. So
All right.
that kind of leads into the next slide where we sort of sort of listed out the components
Yeah. And these are all
when
components that
creating a contingency
you've gotta
plan.
have, right?
Yeah.
So if I am different types of facilities and offices have different types of requirements regarding the accessibility of the different um aspects of the business, right? So we're looking at sometimes if we've got a server, sometimes if you've got printers that scan and everything. What was it you were saying? Oh yeah, yeah. What if the internet goes down? See, he is reminding me of things because he cares about the internet. Because if the internet goes down, there's no Disney Plus. So
Oh yeah.
no Disney Plus makes it
Big,
for a very difficult 2-year-old's
that's a
day.
big deal right there.
Yep, yep. So I mean, you got to figure all that stuff out. What if my EHR goes down? What if the scenario is that the EHR is what goes down, but everything else is operating just fine? Well, then what's that like? Do we test that on a couple of computers, or do we just operate without that? What's the how long can we operate without an EHR?
It's a good scenario actually. What would
Different
you say?
offices are going to have different tolerances.
What would you say common practice is if that situation was occur? Because obviously, if the EMR is out or the EHR software is out, it could be on their end, right? Possibly. I guess
Absolutely.
you'd have
If
to
the
test.
EHR is out, I mean,
Yeah,
it's uncommon, but it's not unheard of that an
it could be like a
EHR can be
maintenance. It could be a maintenance or something that
yeah,
they.
it could be any number of things. It could be a
Yeah, yeah,
maintenance to a ransomware attack to, a server problem. But realistically, they have their own things that they have to follow up to make sure that the data is
sure.
stored properly, and they have backups in different co-located silos throughout the US. So there's one like Colo 5 in Jacksonville, and I think Colo 5 within themselves have one in Oklahoma and then like Washington and then Maine, I
Mhm.
think, or something like that. And it's all backed up. But if you can't access it, what's that protocol like for you to be able to see your patients that day? In our mental health practice, luckily we run e-forces for all of our patients. So we at least have the scripts that
Okay,
the patient's been having. So we can figure out if the provider doesn't remember these patients or something like that. It's honestly a little bit easier when it's a new patient because we're making the record from
of
scratch.
course.
But if it's a follow-up patient, we're like, crap, all right, I can't review the notes unless the provider did it the night before. So what do we do? Oh, I sent my patient out to go get labs. Okay, well, EHR's down. I can't. Where are the lab results? Maybe you can find that on the printer. Maybe you can find that where the front office got it from the patient and they scanned it. And so you upload it in a different place. So it's really just a matter of working through the difficulties of day-to-day life. So what do we need to do for all of these critical programs and services that we have? So you've got to have a list of those. So you got to have a list of the critical components for you to operate your business, and then what's the contingency plan for each of them? Again, try to keep it as simple as possible. So it's,
Sure.
hey, if there's a fire in the office, what do we need to do? Well, if you're completely electronic, you don't need anything. You need everybody to get out of Dodge,
Yeah, of course.
right? Because you just need internet access. You can get that anywhere and a
Right.
computer. So that's easy to do. If it's something to where, hey, we're still paper. All right. So you got a HIPAA privacy problem, not a HIPAA security problem. Same scenario. If it's fire, what do you do? Are you going to try to get all those files out? Man, I was just in an office where one patient record, jokingly, I was like, do they fill up one whole box in one record? And they're like,
I've
this
seen
one's
it. I've
three or
seen it.
there's yeah, this
3.
one is on the second
Holy cow.
box. And I'm just like, one
Two,
patient on
even
two boxes. That's
even
how
2.
big it's larger than the King James Bible by
That's
magnitudes. All right. So you're just looking at how do we deal with this kind of stuff?
no, that's no, good point. Good point.
Another one is the data backup. Oh, for a while there, everybody had their own servers on site. This was far more prevalent during those time periods. So it would be a matter of, okay, if the server hard drive that's in there is the active one, when was the last time it was backed up? Because something happens to that server, you're going to have to be working off the backup. And that
Yeah.
backup could be one
It
day
could.
old, it
Yep.
could be 6 months old, which I saw that once.
Uh,
And the office manager called me seeing if I knew of a way to help them recover that. And I was like, if you've got a DeLorean and we can hit 88, we can probably do something about it. But that's the only way, because there's nothing you can do with that. You've got to keep those backups
now does that
fresh.
particular scenario that you're sharing, was that like just the medical practice handling that on their own in terms of
Yeah.
like going logging in and scheduling a backup, or did they have an IT team behind them
So they had an
doing
IT
it, or
company, they had a server on site, and what the plan usually was that they would go and they kind of treated this like a spare tire on your car if you have a full size spare, where they never got the other one replaced. So what ended up happening was they were working off of the original backup. Something had happened to the original disk. They never bothered to get a new one and use that as the new backup. So within like 6 months, they had to go through the same process twice. But it was a hell of a lot worse because it went from
yeah,
blank,
they let the time.
so you really want to take a look at, when does information go if you do have a server and it's offsite, when does that information go to the server? Where does that information go? What are all the stops? Does it go from the printer to a desktop to the server? Does it go from the printer, scanner, copier to the server directly? Where are all these things? Where are all these connecting points? If you've got an in-house server at a server farm, but you use a VPN to hop on and connect, but you can't get in for whatever reason, how are you supposed to do your job? So this is all these things kind of come into play. And I don't want to make it seem like you're doing more work, but it does allow for the practice and the incident response team to understand a little bit better about their setup. Because a lot of people, and this has happened even to me in my own businesses, where I'm like, all right, IT, go handle it. Just tell me later. I'm not going to understand half of it. You're going to be speaking Russian to me, and it's whatever. So in those kinds of scenarios where you don't want to be necessarily bothered, ask IT to make you a map, kind of like an org chart, and just say, okay, well, faxes, scans all go to this drive. This drive is connected to this. In order to access it, you need A, B, or C. So you can look at it and at a glance be like, okay, so we need to protect, this is the priority, and then these are secondary. And in order to access it, we need one of these. So you can really play
Who
Clue
has
with
access
this.
to it, and obviously designate who has
Yeah,
access to
you can
those as well.
really break it down. And let's say that you switch IT companies. Your new IT company doesn't come in and be like, what in the world rat's nest did they create? Now you actually have an org chart that you can
Exactly.
go to and say, hey, this is what they did. It may not have been the best way, but it worked. Whatever. I don't know. It worked for me. So it's just a matter of finding out, asking those uncomfortable questions.
That sounds necessary too, to have some sort of blueprint of what's going on, because at the end of the day, as
Absolutely.
a business owner, you don't have that time of day to map everything out yourself. So, no,
Absolutely. So, I mean, I've even seen, when it comes to certain risks, I've even seen where all the devices are protected by the IT company, but the IT company has a way to remotely wipe the computer.
interesting.
So if your laptop gets stolen or it gets lost and you're like, crap, I don't want to deal with this HIPAA breach. Well, all of a sudden it's not a breach anymore because the IT went and
Zip,
factory
the
reset
laptop
everything.
explodes.
Well, I mean, it's not Mission Impossible,
Um,
Ray.
I know, I'm kidding. I
I
was
mean, but it just factory resets it. Now, then
right.
again, if somebody steals my laptop, I wouldn't mind at all for it to blow up in their face, but make it a lot easier for me to find them afterwards, right? But
Yeah,
but
bits
with
and
something
bits.
like this, I mean, you just got to take a look at what are the options? What's our budget like? What can we afford to do? What we do in our office now, because everything is cloud based, the most important thing for us is having internet. So we have our normal internet, and then we have our hotspot capability on our cell phones, so that way we can operate. The other thing that we've done is all of our computers are dump computers. They're literally just really fast, low memory, so you can't store much crap on there or patient health information on there. And we just go for it. And that makes my life easier on the CRUD side because it's far easier to get rid of that hard drive. And I don't have to worry about how we Hillary Clinton that thing because there isn't much on there to begin with.
Now you mentioned the internet too. You're totally right. If your main internet goes out, you got hotspot, you can easily just switch over to that. And
But you got to remember too, the hotspots can tend to be rather secure as long as you don't
right,
hotspot automatically on an unsecured hotspot and just create it for everybody to jump on. So most cell phones can do it just fine. Your bigger problem is along the sides of cost because some people have cheaper plans than others when it comes to those data plans.
sure.
So is your setup one that you say, all right, employees, you're going to set up the hotspot and you're going to use your work device and we'll reimburse you for that hotspot cost? Or do you have like one of those business pods or how are you what's
Good
the
point.
MO for this?
Sure. Good point.
But again, easy way to test it. If you don't know you have internet through your you have telephone lines through your internet or regular phone lines, turn off your modem.
Mm.
Just real fast. Just turn it off real quick. Watch what happens. If your phones go dead, you have voice over IP, which most offices have now, whether they know it or not. Just because as they upgrade the telephone lines, people have been naturally moving everything over to voice over internet. So whether you probably have it with your internet package and you don't even know it.
It's a good test. I might try that here
I
after
mean,
after the webinar
It's
just to
it's
see.
I mean, it's completely harmless because like I said, just in the process of restarting your modem, which no one ever does because I don't know, I've never done it on purpose on you know what I mean? Like unless I'm doing something, I don't just go walk around, oh, let me restart my modem. No, it's because it takes 3-4 minutes for everything to get back online. You don't want to deal with that nonsense. So it's just a matter of how do we prepare for these kinds of scenarios? And it's not necessarily that you want to inconvenience all of your employees and your whole team, but you want to have it to where they know what to do naturally when something occurs. Um, think about this just like if you end up walking upon a scenario where you need someone to call 911 while you're acting as first aid. Do you just say someone call 911 or do you point somebody out and say, you call 911?
That kind of goes into this slide is make it a policy, right?
Make it a
Make it
policy, train the policy,
yes.
test the policy, and document how the test goes. No one cares. The federal government does not care if you failed the test in a biblical manner. They just
As
want
long
to
as
know
you're
that you're
documented.
testing it. Yeah, they
Hmm.
just want to know that you're testing it. Obviously, if it doesn't work, change it. Don't keep it the same. But that should go without saying. Common sense is a superpower nowadays. So I'm saying it. If you test it and it doesn't work, change it. But definitely don't be afraid to test what your protocols are. That's what they're there for.
For the audience benefit, Jose, how often do you have to test these things? Is there a
The
requirement for it?
the legislation, the regulations just say test it. It doesn't say how often, but you can judge that based on your team. If
Hmm.
you have some team that they work in a far more, how can I put this, laissez-faire manner, then you may want to test it more frequently, just to make sure that they know what to do, that they're not going to blank on what to do, that they're not just going to be like, oh well, it's not working. I'm just going to sit here, tweedledee, tweedledum, like.
Right. Let me throw
But you're
another
going to find out.
let me throw another scenario at you, because this actually, I'm curious. Maybe the audience, maybe they deal with this, but let's just say, I'm a medical practice. I have a 1099 nurse practitioner that is working for me full time. Does that person have to know the contingency plan as well, since they're sort
Are
of
they working
independent?
in your office?
Yes.
I would say so because
Okay.
they're part of the team.
Yeah.
They may not be. So what you want to do is when you have scenarios like that, or
Hmm.
even when you have a practice within a practice, I may have a subspecialty within my specialty practice or a specialty within my primary care practice. They may be a completely different entity,
Hmm.
but they still partner with me on certain things for co-location costs or administrative costs. Well, their plans are obviously going to be a little bit different because you might be the landlord. So one example would be I'm a physical therapist that works out of a primary care office in 2 days a week. Well, why do I do that? Because the care guy has the building, he owns the building, he has the space, and he has the patient. So screw it, I'll come to you. Just so that way I can speed up that referral process. Well, now in my business plans as the physical therapist, I can say that a lot of the issues or a lot of the plans are based on my landlord
Mm, that makes
because I'm
sense.
just subleasing the space. I'm subleasing some of the staff, but they're not mine. I may be using their internet or I may be just using my laptop and it's connected to my hotspot all day.
Mm,
Like, but you can document all these things. So what happens if your phone dies and you forget your charger cord? What are you going to do? All right, well, I got to connect to somebody's internet.
right.
Or you know what I mean, like, or I'm going to buy a portable
Or
battery,
hotspot.
like, so it really goes down to what's that setup look like, and that's the whole point of this is you got to figure out the question, like you got to figure out what happens if this is the what if scenario, right? So I'm that subspecialty in a primary care office. Which of the employees are my responsibility in an active shooter environment? None of them? Okay, cool. So what am I supposed to do? Hide in the corner, lock the door in the room that I'm in? Like what is the process? Am I close to the exit? And do I make a break for it? Am I going to be Batman and climb, or is this going to be Die Hard? I'm going to crawl through the ceiling and then hop down, like what is the plan here? And test it. I mean, don't literally crawl through the ceiling. I mean, unless you really want to, but I mean, it'd be a story if you did. I don't know anybody that's actually done it that way, but like but test it. How close am I to the fire escape?
Right.
If I'm on a second or third floor building, how do I get down when a tornado is coming? How do I get down if there's an earthquake? Do I wait for the elevator? Probably not, because that's usually one of the first things that gets turned off. So where are the stairs?
Also,
Do I have a
there's
window I can jump
resources
out?
out there that sort of explain these scenarios as well. It's not like you're just completely on your own trying to figure this out. There's definitely
No, but use
resources out
common
there.
sense.
Oh, of course. Of course.
Like I know it's a superpower now, but it's one of those deals where, okay, what is the most likely thing to occur? Like for example, let's say I am in a bad part of town. All right, I have bums all over the place. Some of them are violent, some of them are non-violent. So I leave the non-violent ones alone. But what do I do if one guy, Steve's starting to get a little antsy and freak out? What's that conversation? What's that red line that we need to take action? Or our doors locked so he can't come in through the back door, but he comes in through the front door. So that way we can go out the back. Like what's this all look like?
No, good points, Jose. And really the answer is it depends, right? Depends on your situation, depends
Every
on
practice is completely different.
yeah, yeah.
Every single practice is completely different. I mean, I could be a provider that works from home.
Yeah, yeah.
What's my contingency plan? Well, if I got to evacuate because it's a national state of emergency or a state of emergency for my area because of a storm that's coming in, what's my continuity protocol? Well, hopefully I'm working off a laptop and not a desktop, so I don't have to carry a screen and a giant
So the whole
desktop with me,
everything with
right?
you.
You know, what? So all of these scenarios are crucial, right, buddy? Yep, we got to take the batteries with us so that way we can make all the toys that make lots of loud noises while mommy and
So
daddy are on the phone, right?
let's end it on this note, Jose. I know you're gonna like this, but obviously when it comes down to risk analysis and contingency planning, risk analysis sort of helps you shape and mold what your contingency plan is going to look like, right?
So the risk, well, really, what the risk analysis is going to do when you're doing when you're working on the practice level is that it's going to go and ask the question: do you have a contingency plan?
Mhm.
And if you do, when was the last time you tested it?
Okay.
Because if you haven't tested it, what's the point of the plan?
But what about the scenario you get a risk analysis and you don't have a plan in general, right? And that's
You
one
don't
of
have
the
a plan in general. I mean,
yeah.
if what is it? A wise man once told me, you either are you planning to fail or are you failing to plan?
I like that.
And I may be getting that one wrong, but I'm sure you guys are getting the point that I'm trying to get across here. And it's very, very simple, like figure it out. Ignorance is no longer an excuse. The federal government took that away when the PPACA was passed.
The main thing is it's a requirement, right? You got to have these contingency plans in
But
place and
again, it's a requirement in a couple different places, right?
right,
So the
right.
active shooter one is one for HIPAA security, HIPAA privacy, and OSHA. Three of your main four. You might as well just do it.
Yeah.
So
If
I mean, it's just a matter of how do you set it up properly? How do you set it up so it's not a giant burden to you? Well, on the active shooter one, you know what you do? You either have a friend that comes in and starts getting wild with it, or you go and say, "All right, guys, we're going to be testing an active shooter. What do we do?" And you just roll through
role play it.
and role play it straight out,
Yeah.
and it's one of those things again where okay, front desk person says, well, I duck and I signal somebody to call 911, or and somebody else is because of that signal is all of a sudden getting the patients in there quietly while we're trying to figure out what this person wants, so it's just you have to look at what your setup is. I know
Yeah.
you can see his head.
I see them. Well, hey, no, Jose,
What do
I
you think
appreciate
about
those points, and
it?
obviously,
Yeah.
on this slide, I just put down some solutions. Obviously, conduct the risk analysis. Most important, obviously, when it comes down to contingency planning, implementing policies and procedures on how to, aff- and again, the situation can vary on the practice, but just going back to the active shooter, implementing policies on how to handle that situation, right? And have it written documentation for that. And then ultimately, it comes down to training as well, right? Like we said, these are situations that, obviously need to be written in policy, but at the same time, there needs to be training conducted as well. And as Jose mentioned, it's not really there's no necessary legislative requirement on how often you should be doing these trainings, but I would say at least minimum of once a year, right?
I mean, if you're not testing it once a year, then you're not really
Then you're
testing
not
it at
really
all, right?
exactly.
So, I
So
mean, and it's going to be difficult for your team to really understand what's going on. Now, if you have a smaller office, one thing I always like to do is I like to get team buy-in. And the way I get team buy-in is by presenting the problem to the team, the entire office, and we go and say, okay, so what do we do? What do we do? Not here I am telling you what to do, but what do we do? So then, maybe Sharon says, "Oh yeah, hey, well, I'll engage the person in the front and I'll signal to John." And John's the MA telling everybody, "Hey, Susan, you call the cops. And John's gonna keep going to all the little exam rooms, telling everybody, stay put, lock the door. You don't come out until I tell you, until I give you the all clear. So it's test it out. Ask people what their opinion is on it, and that way, when they give you the opinion and you try it, all of a sudden you have their buy-in to try it because it was their idea.
That's a good point.
But that doesn't work when you're a larger organization with 12 offices and 40 providers and 200 employees. That's a whole
Well, at that
different
point,
it's a whole different
if
animal
you're
then.
within that size of an organization, as you mentioned, you have sort of an incident response team that sort of
You should have an incident
brainstorms
response
those
team.
scenarios and puts together the protocol or the policy for those
Absolutely. But even
situations.
even there, you're going to have a situation where if you've got 6 offices, 12 offices, and 12 providers, 6 offices,
Hmm.
3 offices, each office is going to be completely different.
Sure. Yeah.
Just because of the way it's set up. One may be more likely to flood because maybe it's out on right on the coast, right by the
Right.
beach. That's our bougie office, right? And then we got our downtown office, so we got to worry about the hobos.
Right.
The beach doesn't have to worry about the hobos; they got to worry about the flooding. You know what I mean? So it's just a different scenario, and you cannot assume it can be a cookie cutter. What you want to cover is a cookie cutter, but the questions you want to answer are the same, but the answers are never the same. If that makes any
Right.
sense.
No, it makes sense. And real quick, we're going to open up for just a quick Q&A. But again, for those of you that are just joining us that are new, welcome. And just a couple things that we do here at EPICompliance. We do, for those of you that have been with us from the beginning, we were talking about some OSHA related subjects. We do offer a free OSHA course for those of you that haven't taken your OSHA training this year. There's a link here on this slide that'll take you to epicourses.com where you can sign up and register for free OSHA training, you and your staff. Um, if you guys are looking for training in this area, we do offer a sort of a training program bundle. It offers the OSHA, HIPAA privacy, HIPAA security, Medicare waste, fraud, and abuse training bundled together. For those of you that might have a healthcare practice and looking for a compliance solution, and maybe attended this webinar just to get a little more value, um, you know, we do have a all-inclusive compliance program. Handles all your training, all your policies, procedures, your business associate agreements, and obviously when it comes down to contingency planning, Jose, we do offer policies that uh, sort of guide you on how to create these contingency plans and put them together. So we do offer that guidance as well. Um, Other than that, Jose and I are an open book. We love doing these webinars every week. Um, I'm still waiting on somebody to maybe throw us a subject.
Hey man, if not, I mean, this was pretty cut and dry. So I mean,
Yeah, it
it's
is.
not that big. There shouldn't be that many questions on something like this. And if there is, it's going to be a hyper specific one to their use case. So
Sure.
I was not expecting many questions on this topic today.
Well, if
But
anybody has any questions, I'm gonna go ahead and open the floor here for the next minute. If you guys have any questions, just throw it out there. Or hey, we're always looking for new subjects to talk about. Maybe something that's currently going on, at your practice that might be worth talking about as a whole. So if you have any topics that you may want us to talk on, please throw that in chat as well. Otherwise, like I said, I'll open up to Q&A. Let us know your thoughts.
yeah, well, wait for that. Next week is when we start our multi-week on macro MIPS, right? Or no?
So next week's subject, we're going to be talking about telehealth compliance.
That's
And
right.
then the week after that is when we're going to be talking about the MIPS and macro.
Yeah. The macro MIPS
We've
when we
gotten a lot
split.
of hype though for the telehealth. So I'm actually interested. We've gotten a lot of registrants for that one so far. So
I mean,
Uh,
it's going to be something to where it's your with telehealth. The TLDR for that one is that it's going to be you got to figure out what your use case is.
mhm.
Is this and what are we trying to do? A nonprofit scenario like a hospital is going to be using it for a completely different reason than a small for-profit business, outpatient clinic. Some specialties are going to be able to do this a lot easier and a lot more effectively than other ones just because of the nature of the beast. It's figuring out, okay, who are the different alphabet agencies I need to be aware of in order to be effective. And
Makes
we'll be
sense.
using my mental health clinic as an obvious example of one. So that way, yeah, he's saying he wants to be here too. So we'll see. We'll see about that. Hopefully we can get you in here.
We'll get him a co-host spot. We'll set him up with a
Yeah, he'll be
laptop, and
co-hosting. He'll
he can screen share it with
he's the
us.
better looking one, right, buddy? Yeah.
Well, that's apparent. Just
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
So
guys, hey, I appreciate everybody's time, and I hope you guys found some value out of today's presentation. As I mentioned, if you guys have any questions, concerns, Jose and I are an open book. Feel free to reach out to us. Everybody here is going to be receiving some correspondence as well regarding next week's webinar topic, and obviously the link to register for that. So thank you guys again for your time, and we will see you guys next week. Jose, appreciate you as always. Little man.
yep. Have a good one. Donovan, say bye. Donovan, say bye.
Take
All
care,
right.
Donovan.
He's not.
Thanks, Jose.
No
Thank you,
problem.
everybody.
Bye.
Take care.